Shell casings found at the scene of just a brazen shooting in Midtown Manhattan reportedly had the words "deny, defend, and depose" written on them, according to police sources who spoke to ABC News. And new surveillance photos may give us a better look at the potential shooter. New details are flooding in about the apparent assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, and we're going to bring you the very latest on this investigation right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so at the time of this recording, as this is a rapidly developing story, law enforcement may be getting closer to identifying the man who walked up behind the CEO of UnitedHealthcare as he was just walking to the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan and shot him in the back, and while he was on the ground. That is what police sources have told ABC News. You see, at the time of this recording on Thursday afternoon, a senior law enforcement official has told the New York Times that authorities have a picture of the suspected shooter's face from inside a hostel that he was staying in Manhattan. It's called the HI New York City Hostel. Now, according to the New York Times, the shooter reportedly shared a room with two men with whom he didn't know. Now, to be more precise, Crime Stoppers released these new photos of what some outlets are saying is the suspect. NYPD had said earlier on that this was just a person of interest, but they show this person's face. And they were reportedly taken from inside that hostel. The exact date when it was taken, we don't know. But in one photo, and it's kind of eerie, this person seems to have a big grin. A $10,000 reward is being offered for information that could lead to an arrest in this case. And Crime Stoppers flyers have been posted all over the city. 50-year-old Brian Thompson went down after multiple shots were fired. He was shot at least once in the leg, once in the back. Now, surveillance video from outside the Hilton Hotel shows the gun seeming to jam during the shooting, but the shooter just quickly clears it and keeps on shooting. And then he walks away from the scene before hopping on an e-bike, disappearing into Central Park. Now, we're going to get into a lot of details about this, and to focus a little bit more about it, I want to bring back on Chad Ayers, former deputy, founder of Proactive Response Group, to talk about this. Chad, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming here on studio. Just your initial thoughts on this, because we haven't had a chance to speak about it yet.
No, I mean, disturbing. Obviously,
Yeah.
I flew in this morning. I'm staying a block away. When this news broke yesterday, I was just in shock. I mean, condolences to the family of this gentleman. But when I finally saw the video of it actually taking place, it literally looked like something off of a Netflix film that you see, like a hired hit. I think it's pretty evident by now, Jesse, this was not a random act, I would not say. And I would not be surprised if, with the photo that's already been released of this person of interest, I have a feeling law enforcement, NYPD, already probably knows who this is. But obviously they want to keep this investigation, as secure as possible until they apprehend this.
But isn't it good to get that photo out so more people could see it?
100%, and that's what what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, a friend or a family member, this photo is circulating.
It's distinctive looking.
100%. I mean, they know who he is. Someone knows who he is. Someone's going to, do the right thing, I hope, and let's get a name and let's bring this guy in.
There were so many aspects about this shooting, just taking it at first glance from yesterday. Comes out of nowhere, fires the weapon in a very, very calculated manner, doesn't shoot a nearby bystander, which we'll talk about too, and is able to escape in such an urban environment like this. Can't find him yet. It seemed professional. It seemed like this is not his first time. And yet, if it's true that he takes off the mask knowing there's surveillance footage in this hostel, that feels sloppy.
Well, does it say, was the mask taken off before? Is this photo from the hostel before or after? Do we know?
I believe it's from before, and we just don't know when it was from before.
Sure. In 2024, with today's, DNA, digital evidence, cameras all across this city, it's really hard to get away with crime like this. So, was he sloppy? Yes. Leaving shell casings, because people don't think about this. When I'm loading around, what's on my finger, as I'm loading my magazine, there is trace DNA being put on those shell casings that are left at the scene. They talked about him going into a Starbucks and also getting like a granola bar or something too.
I'll talk about that. Yeah. But here's the thing, they're searching that hostel, or they're working on getting warrants for the hostel, sure, and also probably interviewing those men that he was staying with. What goes into that? Because again, this is you need to work fast in a case like this, right? And it makes me wonder what goes into processing a scene like that, what goes into speaking to those individuals.
So I've never stayed at a hostel. I don't know what kind is any type of identification required to get in there. I'm going to try to build a profile. Who is this individual? How long has he been staying there? Has he had communication with anybody else? Has anyone come to visit him? Obviously, where did this gun come from? But first and foremost, they're going to try to figure out, where's this guy from? Does he have friends or family here in the city? If you're staying in a hostel, I would say probably not. So is this guy traveling in for this, murder per se? There's a lot that's going on, but NYPD has some of the best investigators in the world.
By the way, we're going to try to stay on top of the story as much as we can. And for that, I have to thank our sponsor, Odoo, who helped make this episode happen. And for those of you in your own businesses, this really applies to you. So Odoo has this incredible accounting app. And you know how keeping track of finances can get messy and confusing? Well, Odoo makes it super simple because with their accounting app, you can manage invoices, expenses, even get financial reports all in one place. Look how clean this interface is. It's designed to save you time, reduce headaches. You can automate those repetitive tasks, which means you'll have more time to focus on what you really love, growing your business. So if you want to take control of your finances, make your accounting life a whole lot easier, check out Odoo's accounting app at our link odoo.com/LC Sidebar 7 and try Odoo for free right now. And how difficult would it be to escape New York City? Big question for the last 24 hours is he's able to escape in an urban area, especially since the law enforcement responded in 2 minutes. Could he take a bus? Could he take a train? How quickly could he escape the city? Or is he still in the city? It's a massive city. What's your take on that?
The initial getaway is not very hard. Being on an e-bike, 6:45 in the morning. Obviously, Jesse, you're from this area.
Yeah. I pass that area all the time, by the way.
How many people at 6:45, 7 in the morning are on those streets heading to work? You blend in very easily.
I said this before. That area filled with tourists. It's tons of office buildings, people going to work there. There are people out and about there.
And even wearing the mask. In this city, as cold as it is, having a full type of ski mask on, that's really not going to raise many people's suspicions. Yep. Now, getting out of the city, again, if he had planned this out, then he probably already knew exactly how. If he is gone, he knew exactly what means of transportation. Is he working by himself? Did he have help? Did whoever hire him to do this? Those are all these questions that need to be built around this. But I think you better bet that obviously all, TSA's being notified, bus, Greyhounds, all these trains using types of, facial recognition features. I don't want to go too much into, the technology that may be used because I don't want to jeopardize this case.
So let me further this a little bit. So according to reporting from Yahoo News and the Washington Post, this suspected shooter exits Manhattan's 57th Street subway station for the F train at around 6:15 a.m. And the suspect's clothing on that surveillance matches the images from the NYPD that were released. Then, about 2 minutes later, the suspect is inside of a Starbucks on 6th Avenue. By the way, I've been in that Starbucks before. I'm just saying this. I know this environment. I get it. And then he goes to the scene of the attack, where that Starbucks is not far away from there. And it's apparently he goes there and is waiting a few minutes before Thompson comes outside and is walking past the Hilton Hotel. And the ease with which the shooter appears to just lie in wait for Brian Thompson, fires, escapes, it has many people wondering if this was a professional hit. And another bizarre detail that points to there being more to this than just a random act of violence is that the shell casings found at the scene, as I mentioned, reportedly had words written on them. So 2 law enforcement officials told the New York Times that while ballistics testing is still ongoing, the words depose, deny, and defend were found on the casings. And that is significant because there was a book released in 2010 with a very similar title, Delay, Deny, Defend. And that book argues that health insurers like UnitedHealthcare, they try to increase their profits by having claims departments deny claims, even if they're supposed to be covered under the person's insurance policy. And that's important as we're trying to figure out what could be the potential motive behind this killing. Now, the New York Times reached out to the author of that book, J.M. Feynman. He's a professor emeritus at Rutgers Law School. Our understanding is he declined to comment. Chad, those words are so strange, and it makes you wonder, A, oh my gosh, does this give us a motive into what's happening here? Versus B, could this be throwing investigators off?
That's what I think.
That's what you think.
Again, there's so many different avenues to look at this case, and so many theories that we can dive into here. I personally think that is there to throw somebody off. I think that someone, at the end of the day, what we've said from the beginning, someone is using this guy to do this. They coached him. They told him how to do this. Who knows? I may be wrong, and this guy planned all this out alone. Earlier yesterday, though, Jesse, they discussed. We just reported that with the new timestamps, he was only there a few minutes before. Early yesterday, it said he had staked the place out for a while. This guy's done his homework. He obviously has. If this is truly a targeted hit, he knew this guy's pattern and routine, or knew that.
How? Someone had to have known what his routine was, or he studied him and had some inside information, right? How did he know he was leaving? I think Thompson was staying at a different hotel and was headed towards the Hilton. How did he know he was going at that point?
Well, I think we discussed there was some type of event he was going to that hotel.
Yeah, he was going to an investors conference.
So an investors conference. You know how these conferences go. There's usually an agenda sheet.
Sure.
A lot of websites even post, hey, our keynote speakers are this, that, and the other.
How did he know he was going to be crossing that street?
Correct. So how long, and I don't know when this gentleman flew into town, when the CEO flew into town and got here, where's he originally from? Is he from this area?
So let me go a little bit further, to give everybody a little bit of background about Brian Thompson. So Brian Thompson had been the CEO of UnitedHealthcare since 2021. He'd been with the company for 20 years. By the way, he previously had overseen departments dealing with Medicare and government programs. This is according to his LinkedIn page. And UnitedHealthcare is based in Minnesota, which is where Thompson had lived with his wife and two sons. He had traveled to New York for, as I mentioned, this investors conference that was hosted by the parent company, United Health Group. That conference was at the Hilton, but Thompson, as I mentioned, was staying in this hotel across the street, and he was walking to the Hilton at around 6:45 a.m. Wednesday morning when he was ambushed. And surveillance shows that the gunman, again, waited around several minutes before Thompson got there, didn't seem interested in any of the other passers, people that were passing by. But when Thompson walks past, the gunman steps out from behind a car, doesn't miss a beat, and just fires. And we can see from surveillance images that he was wearing this dark-colored hoodie, a face mask, a gray backpack, and the gun that he was holding appeared to have a silencer on it, but police didn't confirm that during a news conference in the hours after the shooting. And then I'll get into the person that was standing nearby. But first, by the way, the firearm. Again, going back to this idea of a professional hit, would it be normal that the gun jams?
So I've watched this video several times. I cannot tell if the gun jammed. Obviously, everyone saw the suppressor, which a lot of people from TV calls a silencer.
Yeah.
I know that, and again, I'm not a ballistics expert. I'm not some big firearms expert, basic knowledge from law enforcement. But I do know when a suppressor is put on a firearm, a lot of times you have to put a different type of, what we used to call like a plus P round, a little bit hotter of a round, to make sure the gas it has enough pressure to cycle the slide, eject the spent shell casing. So did that gun, was it not cycling enough to eject the spent shell casing? Again, I'm not trying to dive into this too deep, because the first time you watch it through, you think this looks like an amateur, someone who thinks that on a semi-automatic handgun, I have to rack it every time, right? Obviously you do. You put your magazine in initially, you rack that first round in the chamber. Right. After that, I pull the trigger and it automatically does its job. It's a machine. So when I watched it, I thought, well, this guy, there's no way everyone's talking about this as a hit. This looks like an amateur. He keeps racking the slide every single time. Because before it got released that the words were on the bullets or on the shell casings, my first thought, because of this guy's background working in government healthcare, I thought, is this possible that this guy worked for the VA or had a high ranking, and this is some type of upset, former military guy that is upset with the services from the VA. But when we see the book and that title and how it ties to healthcare, that kind of puts that out the window.
How tough is it to get us, if it really was a suppressor, if it really was a silencer, how tough is that to get? Either, let me rephrase, legally or on the black market, and to get it into New York City?
Legally, it's all online now. It's gotten a little bit easier. There used to be upwards in almost a year to wait for your background, and it has, the FFL you had to get, or the tax stamp has to be shipped to an FFL, a federal firearms license. You have to get this tax stamp. Again, there's a lot to it. Off the streets, off the black market, not hard at all. And look, New York City has some very strict gun laws, but
we have tons of gun crime.
We have tons of gun crimes.
So I mentioned this person who was standing outside of the Hilton within just a few feet of the suspect when the shooting started. They immediately took off. I mean, first it looked like they were shocked, obviously. Then they take off. And the shooter didn't pay any attention to them. I watched the video. I don't see the shooter really even react to that person. That person's lucky to be alive. So again, if this was just somebody who was killing anybody they could see in their vicinity, you would think that person would be dead. That's what makes this also look like a targeted hit. But I hate to be callous. I'm not trying to be callous, but you left a witness there who was the clearest person to you at the crime, an eyewitness. Do you find it strange that person wasn't?
No,
thankfully that person wasn't, but.
No, actually on Monday I was teaching a class on de-escalation, but part of that class talked about characteristics of an attacker.
Yeah.
And a characteristic of an attacker is that 1,000-yard stare. They get tunnel vision, right? So you basically black out anything that's around you, and you're like, there's my target, and it's subconscious. You don't realize you're doing it. A lot of times you'll get this gaze. You're blinking. The average person, I forget, blinks I think like 20 times a minute or something like that. Someone that's about to commit a crime, it speeds up to close to 120 times a minute, or it has dropped down to 3 to 4 times a minute. So the body reacts different during stressful encounters. And obviously that's, I think, what happened. Targeted attack. The suspect's thinking, hey, I see him, I shot him, now I got to get the hell out of here.
I have to ask you, if this was a targeting, if this was an assassination, why do it then? What do I mean by that? This is New York City. This is an urban environment. There are cameras everywhere. There are people everywhere. 6:45 is not 4 in the morning, okay? You do it there. You have to imagine there's a strong likelihood that you would be captured. And it's a really brazen attack in the open. Is this just an attack of opportunity? I know where he's going to be. This is the only time he'll be by himself. Don't you find it strange that of all places to kill Brian Thompson, it's at that moment on that street at that time?
Again, I think we're going to get more on the background of this, of what kind of surveillance was done on him. When this guy is apprehended, when he's apprehended, he will be apprehended. But criminals are criminals for a reason. They make mistakes too. But I think he saw his opportunity at 6:40 and 5 in the morning. He knew that he had a better chance of getting away when it's still dark outside. He's not following him inside this investors conference or event where you've got, I don't know, however many people were inside a busy hotel. So there was his opportunity, and he took it when the least amount of people were away. So again, talking about characteristics of an attacker, a lot of times they'll do a target glance and they'll be scanning, and they're scanning for cameras and they're scanning for people. But again, when he made his mind up that he was going to commit this attack, he did it, and he got on his bike and got the heck out.
Let's talk about the bike, because after cutting through an alley, apparently, the shooter gets on an e-bike, which they originally identified as a city bike. And there are kiosks and bike racks. They're set up all around the city. On Wednesday, though, Lyft, which operates city bikes, said that police told them the gunman did not use a city bike. NYPD has yet to clarify that. There's also been some investigation into whether the shooter had the bike already staged somewhere so that he could just grab it and take off. Now, in addition to 3 spent 9mm shell casings and 3 live 9mm rounds that were found at the scene, police apparently also found a cell phone that had been dropped in the alley that the suspect had ran through. There was also a water bottle and a candy bar or power bar wrapper that were also found. Again, that may have been purchased from that Starbucks that we mentioned. Those images of him in the Starbucks wearing the mask are what were released too. And ABC News reported that DNA and fingerprint testing is being done on all of that as well. Chad, your thoughts on that?
Well, 3 spent shell casings and 3 live rounds.
Yep.
Where did the 3 live rounds come from?
Tell me.
Every time a live round is coming out. So again, that's why I cannot figure out, was the gun jamming or was he an amateur? And he is, because if I'm going to hire a professional hitman, you damn well better make sure you know how to operate a firearm. And someone who is just racking it. So again, we're not going to know. At this time, was the gun actually malfunctioning, or was he just an amateur racking each of those rounds out? But talking about the DNA,
yeah,
here we have it.
Well, I also find it interesting that he allegedly bought those items right before the shooting to give him literally energy. If he's going to be on the run, right, he's probably not going to know when he can have his next meal, where his next meal will be, maybe needs the energy before he's about to engage in such an effort like this. Am I wrong about thinking about that?
No, I think what he is thinking is my mask is covering me up. He is solely relying on that mask.
Yep.
And again, not thinking about DNA and trace evidence being left. It almost reminds me, Jesse, of what we talked about, last year, the Brian Goldberg case.
Yeah.
And how they discovered pulling trash from his parents' house when he made it home and pulled the DNA off of a Coke can.
Yeah.
That's how, a lot of was discovered.
You saw the photos in this case, even the masked photos. If you look at it, if you look at the masked photos, which again, I think were taken from the Starbucks, you compare it to the photos of the unmasked person. They look like the same person, in my opinion.
Very distinct characteristics on this gentleman.
Yeah.
Or on the suspect. I don't even want to call him a gentleman. On the suspect, he's got very distinct characters and facial features. With this photo now being released and circulated, the U.S. Marshals are on this, I guarantee it, with NYPD's Marshals Task Force.
And I have one other question
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about this. So Thompson's wife, Paulette, told NBC News that her husband had mentioned that there were some people that had been threatening him. And she told NBC News that while she didn't have any details, there may have been issues that were connected to his work insurance coverage. Paulette released a statement about her husband's death, saying Brian was an incredibly loving, generous, talented man who truly lived life to the fullest, touched so many lives. And most importantly, Brian was an incredibly loving father to our 2 sons and will be greatly missed. And just goes back to the human element, the fact that this is just a shocking crime, and think about who's left behind. Now, NYPD leadership told reporters on Wednesday that Thompson, he wasn't traveling with any sort of security detail, but this shooting, first of all, has got a lot of people spooked because the New York Times is reporting that dozens of lead security officers from Fortune 500 companies, they all around the world, they hopped on this video call Wednesday afternoon to talk about protective measures. That can include everything from investigating threats that are made in online forums and on social media to security team members physically protecting executives as they do to their day-to-day business. But Chad, if he was receiving threats, don't you find it odd that he didn't have a security detail with him?
So obviously in my background, we do executive protection. I've had the opportunity to protect a lot of political figures, musicians, high net worth families. And it is surprising that this gentleman, a source of mine, let me know this morning, actually, as soon as I landed, that he has had a security detail in the past. Thompson has had a security detail in the past, but did not travel to New York City with one. So does the suspect have an inside source that knew that he was traveling without a security detail?
Why didn't he have the detail?
And why don't you have a detail? If you were a CEO of any type of Fortune 100, 500 firm, look, unfortunately, crime is high in this country, and especially coming into a New York City, a beautiful city, but there is an elevated risk of crime and every day robberies and shootings. I want these people to have someone with them.
Let me tell you something. As somebody from New York, we could talk about crime in the city. Having a brazen shooting in Midtown Manhattan like this, I don't recall seeing anything like this in recent history. I don't. A brazen shooting, obviously of crime, but to see what appears to be an assassination.
A targeted attack.
Targeted attack. I mean, again, an allegedly targeted assassination, targeted attack on the streets of Midtown Manhattan. I haven't seen anything like that in recent years. But look, it's just a bizarre case. We'll see where it goes. Rapidly developing situation. We will continue to follow it. Chad Ayers, great seeing you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks,
really
Jesse.
appreciate it. And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, as I said, we'll continue to follow this. But please subscribe in the meantime to Sidebar on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.